Hi, everyone. Welcome to Holiday Treats, our Cookable Berkeley class, final one of the calendar year. I'm Kim Guest. I'm a dietitian with the Work Wellness Program. And let's go ahead and dive in. So I'm going to change the camera angle. Okay, so you can see what's going on here. Okay, so we have 3 holiday treats for you today. We've been doing this class for I think this is the 11th time we've done this class. So we have tons of other holiday treat ideas on our website. So if these don't work for you, go to our website, check it out. We have dozens of other ideas. And I usually try to do something sweet, something savory, and maybe a bonus recipe if possible. So for our, I'll call it the bonus recipe, we have these orange rose ice cubes, I guess we'll call it. And so this can be a garnish for just water, for sparkling water, for spa water, a mocktail, a cocktail, whatever you'd like, just to make something a little extra special. So what we did was we did a little mixture of sparkling water with orange juice and then topped it with the ice cubes. So this one's not quite frozen, but I just want to show you in the beginning, since we don't have a freezer, I can't quite show you how to make it from start to finish. But what I used was a large silicone ice tray. And if you don't have one of these, we actually have a few as a raffle, so you might go home with one. And I'm going to show you how to make it in just a second, but for now, I'll just pull it out so you can see what it looks like when it's mostly done. Hopefully you can see that on Zoom. Yeah, it's just oranges and ice. If you want, you could throw in orange juice into the water to make it like a more of an orange flavor. And then you can top it with whatever drink you want. So here's how it'll look just with water. You could throw in a little rosemary sprig. See if the Zoom can capture that. Yeah, so just a fun little addition to your holiday drinks. So I'm going to show you how to make that at the end, actually. I just want to show that real quick so that I can show you before it's completely melted. But let's get started with the other recipes. So the first one we're going to do is called rava dosa and coconut chutney in a jar. So the idea is that you would give the dry ingredients as a gift in a jar with instructions, and then somebody can make it at home. So we're going to make the dosa mix and put in the jar, and then we're going to make coconut chutney in a bag, and that will go in the jar, and then people can make it themselves. So there's several different types of dosa. It's like a crepe, it's South Indian, and it can have different ingredients in the batter. And sometimes they are filled with like a potato mixture, a vegetable mixture. There's all kinds of ways you can make it, but we're gonna do kind of a simple version that doesn't have a filling. So it's just gonna be the crepe and the chutney. So let's go ahead and make the batter. I'm going to show you how to make it dry first, and then we'll mix it up with the water and we'll actually make some of the dosa too. Okay, so I used to really avoid using any ingredients that were a little bit trickier to find, but if you do that, then it's hard to make recipes that are authentic. So because there's so many Indian markets in the Bay Area and some of these ingredients are available at other stores like Berkeley Bowl, I thought, why not? Let's go ahead and do something that's really fun and delicious. So this recipe is from a website called Vegan Richa. All the recipes there are plant-based, and the woman who makes them is from India. So these are recipes that are either naturally plant-based or that she's adapted to make plant-based. So this particular recipe is a mix of semolina, which is a wheat flour. So these are not gluten-free, but she has an option that uses cream of rice instead to make them gluten-free if you need that. So semolina is a hard wheat flour that's used to make pasta typically. So I got this, let's see, Yeah, it's at Indian markets, it might be called suji thin. We want the thin one rather than the thick one. I also saw it at Berkeley Bowl in the bulk section as semolina. So it's not too hard to find. And then we're gonna use some rice flour. And I have at home some like Korean rice flour that's a little bit more powdery, so it might be slightly different, but I've made it with both types of rice flour. This one's from the Indian market, and they both worked fine. And then, so it's gonna be 1 part of each flour and then a little bit of whole wheat flour. Okay, so this recipe, when it's all mixed with all the water, it should make 5 to 6 dosa, pretty big ones. So we'll start with the rice flour. So we need a 1/4 cup of that. And we need a 1/4 cup of the semolina or suji, the wheat flour, hard wheat flour. And this is some whole wheat flour that I bought in bulk using my own containers. So I know I always talk about that in these classes, how some stores let you bring your own containers. And that's how I bought a lot of these spices too. So then you don't have this much waste. And if you just need a small amount, you can just buy what you need. So 2 tablespoons of whole wheat flour. So to give you an idea, I filled up this container for whole wheat flour and it was 50 cents. So if you just need a little bit and you don't need the whole 5-pound bag, it's a nice way to get just what you need. Okay, now we're gonna add a bunch of spices and flavoring. So it's not just like a plain pancake batter. It's got all kinds of flavorings in it. So the first thing we're gonna do is, let's do the curry leaves. So you might be able to find dried curry leaves at the store, but I went to one Indian market and didn't find them. So I actually bought the fresh curry leaves and I just dried them in the oven myself, which was pretty easy. I just washed them, didn't even bother drying them off that well, didn't even take them off the stems or anything, and threw the whole sprigs in the oven for like 10 to 15 minutes at a low temperature, around 200 or so, and waited till they were crisp. And then after they were crisp, they like fell right off the sprig. I just kind of ran my hand over it. And now I have all these dried curry leaves. So I got the whole bunch for, $2. So if you can't find them dried, you can dry them yourself. Okay, so we need like 4 to 5. I'm gonna do a little extra. I just crumple them in my hands to, what do we call it? Crumbled. Yeah, that's what I just said. Crumbled. Crumbled curry leaves. And we're also gonna add some flavor with onion. So if you were making the dough or the batter fresh, you might use fresh onion, but since this is a mix and it's pretty easy to find dried onion, I got this in the bulk department. You might also find it in a container like this. And if you buy too much, we have a recipe that I really like that we did last year for holiday treats. That was a homemade chili crisp. Chili crisp is like exploding in popularity and it can be really expensive, like $12 a jar. And you can make it at home yourself and you can customize the flavor and the spice level if you'd like. So we have a recipe for that from last year. All right, so 1 tablespoon of onion flakes. Yeah, I recommend, some things you might leave out because they're hard to find, but I wouldn't leave out the curry leaves. It really gives a nice, unique flavor. I don't know if you can smell that, but I can smell it from here already. Okay, we're also gonna add some cumin seeds. So rather than dried cumin or ground cumin, they're in the seed, whole seed form. 1/2 teaspoon. Half a teaspoon. Things like this you might also find in the bulk section, so you don't have to buy a giant bag. Black pepper, 1/4 teaspoon. I'm just gonna crank it right in there since it's kind of hard to measure when it's freshly ground. 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. Also from the bulk department, you can see there, it looks like I filled it up for $1.15. So yeah, it's a good way to save money. Just 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground ginger. So I'm just gonna tap a little bit in there because it's kind of hard to measure that small amount. And some chili flakes. So if you're making this for somebody who doesn't like spice, you can leave out the spicy components, but we'll just do a little sprinkle of chili flakes. Okay, and oh, I left it out, but there's a special ingredient called hing or asafoetida, which I think is probably in that zip up bag in there, if you can find it. Yeah. It's, you just need the tiniest amount, like literally a pinch. It has a strong flavor and scent, and it helps give Indian food that kind of authentic flavor. So you could leave it out, but if you can find it, then I recommend adding that. I think it's in the orange one, sorry. I put in the zip up bag because the smell was really strong, so I didn't want to leave it out. Okay, so there you have the mixture. So if you were going to give this as a gift, you could throw it in a jar. It might be a little hard to get into the jar, but probably would have been easier just to measure it straight into the jar. But I'll show you just to see what it would look like. Let's see if I can get it in there. So if you have a jar like this that's about 16 ounces, then you should be able to fit the mix and the bag for the coconut chutney in there. So here's it's again called asafoetida or hing. So it comes in a small jar. Yeah, you really just need a little pinch. I had trouble opening mine, but we'll just squeeze a little bit in there, and that should be plenty. Okay. So there you have the mixture. And let's go ahead and throw together the coconut chutney, which would probably normally be made with fresh coconut, but since this is going to be dried, we're going to use dried coconut. And we'll just have to rehydrate it with hot water. So I tried this recipe a couple of times with just cold water like the recipe called for, and it did not work. So it's very important that you use hot water to kind of rehydrate it. Yes, hing. Okay, so 1/2 cup of dried coconut. And we're gonna use some of the same spices and herbs. So again, we're gonna do some curry leaves, and we're just gonna throw them in there because this is gonna be pureed in the food processor. Dried chili. So again, if you don't want it to be spicy, you could just leave this out. Dried chilies can really vary in spice levels, so I would look that up if you want to be specific. These ones are not too hot. I tried making it with a chili, what is it called, de arbol, and that was pretty hot. So don't recommend that unless you like spicy. Okay, we also need a teaspoon of sesame seeds. Half a teaspoon of sugar. So if you were gonna make this, you could easily make a bunch of these jars as gifts, right? Because a lot of these ingredients you might have to buy specially for this recipe, and you might not use them in a lot of other recipes. So a good way to use them up is just to make a whole bunch of these as gifts. A 1/4 teaspoon of mustard seeds. I'm just gonna eyeball it. Pretty small amount. Mustard seeds here. Also, I got these at the Indian market. Garlic powder. 1/4 teaspoon. An 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground ginger, again, so just a tiny amount. And then also a pinch of the hing again. So there's the coconut chutney ingredients. You can just stuff that in there. I had some little compostable bags at home that were like half the size of a sandwich bag and it fit perfectly. So if you can find those, you can do that as well. So that's kind of how it'll look as a gift. You can decorate the jar if you want. We have a few different recipes on our website that come in jars. So I like to save jars all year long, especially these like 16-ounce jars. This was from Nut Butter. You can buy things in bulk with them. You can do gifts in them. I save them all year and then give them all away in the holidays and then start over again. Okay. So let's go ahead and make this now. So for the dosa, what you're gonna do is just add water and salt. And it's a pretty thin batter, so it's gonna look pretty watery, but that's how it's supposed to look. Okay, so we need 1/2 teaspoon of salt. 1 teaspoon, so we'll do half of this. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I'm gonna go ahead and give this a stir before we add the water so we don't get any clumps of anything. Okay, so we need, what is it, 1 1/4 cup of water. If you're looking for ideas for holiday gifts, I have some contraptions I like here. So I don't know if you can see this, but this is a liquid measuring cup with the measurements are angled, so you don't have to hold it up to your face. You can look down and see what the measurement is. Okay, so then we're gonna let this sit for 10 minutes. Other types of dosa are a lot more complicated to make. This is sort of like an instant dosa. There is another kind where you soak rice and lentils, I think overnight, and then you blend it and then you let it sit for a day or so to ferment. So that one is a lot more work. So this is just kind of an instant version. So you can see that's, it's pretty thin batter, but that's what we're looking for. Okay, so we'll just let that sit for a few minutes. And we'll make the chutney. So I like to just let it soak in a bowl first with the hot water to sort of rehydrate, and so that we're not putting like straight boiling water into the plastic food processor. But we'll need also the salt and half a cup of hot water, maybe a little more. But I would start with half a cup, and you can always add a little more later because you don't want it to be too watery. Okay. Hot water over here. Okay. Half a cup of hot water. Stir it with a measuring spoon. And you'll notice that, you'll be able to kind of see it rehydrate before your eyes. This will kind of thicken up a little bit. Okay, so let's just let that sit for a few minutes while we work on everything else. We can start the next recipe. So the next one is a pine cone brownie. There's no pine cones used in this. It's just a brownie made to look like a pine cone. So it is actually quite fairly nutritious with dates, which are fruit, and nuts. And you can use a whatever mix of nuts you want, really. Let me just read you a few fun facts about dates. So we're using medjool dates, which are kind of the softest ones. They have a sort of a caramely flavor. They tend to be pretty juicy. And like you can see how squishy they are. They're very big and plump. They work the best compared to other recipes or other types of dates in this recipe. If you have ones that are looking a little bit dry, I would soak them in hot water for about 10 minutes first. Otherwise, the batter might be a little bit too dry. But I just bought these yesterday. I got these in the bulk section at Berkeley Bowl, and I find that those ones are really good. I just reused a container, I think from Trader Joe's, and the ones from Trader Joe's are really good too. So just a couple of my personal favorite places to buy them. So a few fun facts about dates. They're actually not dried, they're fresh. They lose up to 70% of their moisture as they ripen on the tree. So that's how they come off the tree. This type is softer, sweeter, chewier, and larger than other varieties. They're shelf stable for up to a month or in the fridge up to 6 months. They're grown in California on date palms. They're also grown in Arizona, the Middle East, Africa, especially Morocco and South Asia. They have vitamin B6, folate, niacin, magnesium, fiber, and potassium. So about 4 dates, which is that many right there. Whoops, so this many dates has 7 grams of fiber, which is a little over a quarter of your daily requirement for fiber. Most Americans don't get enough fiber. And 12% of daily value for niacin and potassium. A lot of people don't get enough potassium either, which is important for your heart health. It kind of balances out sodium. There's like sodium potassium channels. It's a whole other story, but there aren't a lot of foods that are a big source of potassium by themselves. Even bananas you might think of, but I think that one banana has like 10% of the daily value for potassium. So it's good to get a wide variety of fruit and vegetables to make sure you're getting enough potassium for your heart health. Dates also are rich in polyphenols that may help prevent heart disease and work as antioxidants. So we're getting that with some nuts, which have fiber and protein, other vitamins and minerals. And the batter is mostly made out of that with unsweetened cocoa powder. So if you make the batter just by itself, I should call it dough. It's more of a dough. That can be like a little snack just by itself. So I'll show you that. But if you want to take it a step further, it is more work. It's a little bit tedious, but it's kind of a fun holiday treat. We're going to make them look like little chocolate covered pine cones. So that's, optional if you don't want to do that much work. Okay, so let's get started. So we have our food processor here. And this might work in a blender. I think a food processor really is probably best. You might want to like chop up all the dates by hand. They don't have to be totally pureed. It's kind of hard to get them pureed. And then maybe if you could buy the nuts in a flour form so that they're already chopped up, you might be able to do it, but food processor makes it easy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna grind the nuts first, and we're gonna do half a cup each of raw almonds and raw walnuts. But I've also made this recipe with 100% walnuts, and that worked fine. So just do whatever tastes good to you, or even whatever you have on hand. I think cashews would be okay, pecans. It's all gonna get kind of ground up anyway. So half a cup of each. And we're gonna grind these first. Okay, so this part might be a little loud. Let me rearrange so that people can see it on the screen. Okay, there we go. Okay. Sorry for the noise. Okay, so we just want them pretty finely ground. Almost like a flour. Maybe a few chunks that are a little bit bigger there. Let's see, looks, zoom. And now we're gonna mix in the cocoa powder and just a pinch of salt. You can leave the salt out, but in a lot of desserts, a little bit of salt just helps bring out the flavor. We're just gonna do a little pinch. And the cocoa powder is quarter cup plus 2 tablespoons. I lost my quarter cup, so I'm just gonna do 1/3. Doesn't have to be exact. That's pretty close to a quarter cup plus 2 tablespoons. And then we're just gonna quickly pulse it to combine everything. Okay. So that's how it should look. And we're gonna set this aside for a second. Because now we're going to process the dates in here. Okay. So the dates, you might buy them pitted or they might come with the pits still in them. So make sure you know which ones you have first and remove the pits. Some of them might also have a little stem like that. So make sure you pull that off too. And we need 1 1/4 cups of dates, which is about 12, depending on, you know, how large the ones you get are. Or it should also be about 1/2 pound or 8 ounces. You can see these ones are nice and fresh and sticky, so they don't need to be rehydrated. If you pull it apart and they're like really stringy inside and kind of hard to open, like this one is a little bit harder, then you know, if you've had them for a month or so, then that's when you might want to soak them in hot water. I don't know if you can tell, this one is a little bit drier, but not bad. And it'll be okay, especially when you have the ones like this that are real sticky. We made another chocolate nut and date recipe last year for this class. So if you want another idea, it was peanut butter stuffed dates coated in chocolate. Kind of tastes like a Snickers bar. So you just take these dates, cut them kind of in half lengthwise. Yeah, lengthwise like this, fill it with peanut butter, close it up, dip it in chocolate, and then sprinkle some crunched, what's the right word? Crumbled, chopped peanuts on top. And then it's like little Snickers. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is blend up the dates. And then we're gonna take them out. So there's a few steps here, but it just helps everything get combined well. The processor is gonna do all the work to chop them up. So I would just kind of pulse it because it's gonna want to form a big ball, and that's okay, but kind of happening now. But that's okay, it doesn't have to be perfectly chopped. So you can see we have a big ball of dates. It's kind of starting to soften. Now we're gonna move things around again. I'm just gonna put this right here. We're gonna take the dates out and add them back slowly. So it's okay if there's a little bit in there. Oop, thank you. Okay, so add back the nuts and the cocoa mixture. And while it's processing, we're gonna put the dates back in while it's going. So be very careful that you don't stick your finger in there. You'd have to reach pretty far. I think it'd be hard to reach, but just be really careful because the blade is gonna be going. Okay. I'm gonna drop some in a little bit at a time. One second. Okay. Very sticky, so I'm gonna keep changing gloves. If you don't have a food processor, I was trying to say earlier, you could maybe chop up the dates by hand and buy the nuts in flour form so that they're already ground up. It's kind of tricky. It might be hard to do it that way. So I'm a big fan of the food processor. I know not everybody has one, but I use mine all the time. So once you get one and learn what you can do with it, it can save you a lot of time. And you can buy smaller ones too if you don't want a big one. Okay, so this is our mixture here. So it should hold together well enough that you can form shapes with it. So take out the blade before you reach in there. So you can try giving it a little squeeze and it should hold together well like that. Okay, so this should be enough to do 12 pine cones. I have a couple of examples here that I froze so I could dip them in chocolate. But let's just make a couple. So what you could do is take it all out and kind of divide it up so it's even, but I've made these so many times at this point right now that I can eyeball it, and they don't have to be uniform either. So what I like to do is just roll it into a ball and then try to form it into sort of, yeah, just a cone shape. So a little bit pointier at the top, a little bit thicker at the bottom. And you should get about 12. So it should be, yeah, about a tablespoon worth. You can use a cookie scoop. You could use a cookie scoop. I tried it with a big cookie scoop and it was like twice as big as it should have been. But a smaller cookie scoop might work. So there's just a couple. And then what you're gonna do is stick some almonds in to make it look like a little pine cone. And again, just to remind you, you could just eat these just like this if you don't want to do all these extra steps. So you could just roll into a ball and eat it like that. You could then dip this in chocolate if you wanted. You could coat it in something. So do whatever you'd like, but I'm gonna show you the kind of more complicated version in case you want to do that. Okay, so we have some toasted almond slices here. These work better than, I got these other sliced almonds at Trader Joe's that were raw and like really crumbly and really thin, and those are kind of hard to work with. So I recommend these. I also found some at the Indian market. And what I like to do is pour them out onto a plate or a baking sheet, and then you can separate them out. So you want some of these big ones for the bottom part. And then you might use some kind of smaller ones later on. So it's easier to separate them out first rather than trying to search for pieces while you're assembling them, especially if you're making a dozen or more. Okay, so show that on the camera. I have some of the bigger ones and some smaller ones here. And these don't have to be perfect, but you just start sticking them in, kind of pointing them upwards. And just go around. I've also seen versions where people did this using cereal, like cereal that's shaped similarly. So you could try that too if you want. I also, I did try this with the raw almonds, but I think the toasted one, when you toast nuts, it brings out the flavor, right? So I think it also just tastes better with the toasted almonds. So just kind of like that. Doesn't have to be perfect. Once you coat it with chocolate, it kind of covers up any imperfections. So here's a couple that I did earlier that I froze that are probably no longer frozen. Freezing them is not absolutely necessary, but it does make them easier to dip in the chocolate. Okay, so stick them in the freezer for about half an hour before you dip them. Okay, so let's see if we can whip up a dosa. So I would normally use a big nonstick pan, but it turned out the one that we had here, I found out today, was not very nonstick anymore, so it really didn't work. Luckily, I brought a little mini backup one from home. So we're gonna make some little mini dosa. Okay. The batter's been sitting for at least 10 minutes. You can see the water's on top. It started to kind of separate. So make sure you give that another stir. And even though it's nonstick, the stuff is pretty sticky, so I want to make sure it doesn't stick. So I'm gonna put a little bit of oil, just a, neutral flavored oil in the pan. I'm using grapeseed, but you can use canola or whatever you'd like. And we want it to be pretty hot, because these dosa are actually supposed to look kind of lacy. And I'll explain what that means in a second, but it is a little tricky with nonstick pans, so you don't want to overheat them. So it will ruin the pan, or if you have like a, Teflon pan, it can kind of release some fumes when it gets overheated, which can happen quickly when the pan is empty. So you do have to be careful with that. So probably in an ideal world, you would have like a really amazingly seasoned cast iron pan that you could make these in. I did not bring mine from home because I probably had 50 pounds of other stuff I was carrying. So I just brought my little 2-pound, 1-pound pan. Okay, so the oil is not really moving around too quickly yet, so I think it's not quite ready yet. But I don't want to heat it up too much, so I'm going to keep an eye on that. But in the meantime, I have another Cuisinart bowl here. We can make the coconut chutney. Here's how it looks after it's been sitting for a while. You can see it's kind of thickened a little bit to the point where I might actually need a little bit more water in there. But I'm gonna just blend it up first and see. Add more water if needed. Okay, let's throw in some of the batter here. It's gonna separate pretty much after each time you stir it, so make sure you stir it before you add the batter to the pan. See. Okay, it didn't even sizzle. Sometimes these burners are a lot less powerful from what you have at home. So just remember that if you make this at home, it's probably gonna heat up a lot quicker. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so we're gonna put it through the food processor for a while. If you have a really high powered blender or a small one that's meant for smoothies, it might work a little better. Sometimes when there's a lot of space in your blender or food processor, it doesn't blend as well because it's struggling a little bit, right? So if you have a really, really good small blender, make sure that you don't over process it, because apparently it will start to turn into coconut butter, which I've never experienced because my food processor isn't that powerful, but that can happen. And I'm gonna put a little more hot water in. You might need another couple of tablespoons. I think it needs it. And you might also need to scrape it down, scrape down the sides and the lid, because the coconut will fly up there and it will get stuck and then it won't get blended. Okay, so now we have the dosa going. It tends to work better in a bigger pan. You can get a little bit more of the lacy effect. One way to do that is to like sprinkle the batter in with a spoon, so you actually get holes. It kind of helps the toast look. But we're making mini ones, so it's kind of hard. Also, just to make sure that the edges don't stick, I'm gonna pour a little bit of oil on the outside and just rotate the pan, and the oil is gonna go around the edges, and that's gonna help the edges lift up. So you know it's time to flip it when the edges start to brown and start to separate from the pan. Okay, let's check on our chutney here. I also find that making this chutney, it holds together a little bit better after a little bit of time in the fridge. When you first make it, it might look kind of watery, but if you put it in the fridge for an hour or so, it will hold together better. Had some left over, but you probably saw on your samples that it was like holding together pretty well. So keep an eye on your pan, don't let it get too hot, but we do want it to get nice and brown. So if the heat's too low, it won't really happen. So you kind of just want on like medium high. Okay, so that's looking pretty good and combined, and it'll look even better after a little bit of time in the fridge, and maybe the temperature will be better because we put hot water in there, right? So that will help cool it down. So let's put this to the side. Okay, so that's gonna finish cooking. Really quick, I'll show you the ice cube. So here's a little example. So I have a silicone ice cube tray, and if you have one that's about this size, you'll probably need about 2 oranges. You can use whatever kind of oranges you'd like. You can use a mixture. I use Cara oranges because they're actually kind of pink in the inside, so I thought that would look cool with the since they're supposed to look like roses. So slice them thin, not too thin that they're gonna fall apart, but you don't want them to be too thick so that you can't fold them. So those are, you know, pretty small, less than a 1/4 inch or so. And then if your pan ice cube tray is about that size, what you're gonna do is cut off the bottom third. I like to make a bunch at once. And you can stick those in there like that. And then just keep going until it looks like a rose. So usually about 4 pieces, I think. Oops, that one I cut a little funny, but. And I often end up using the small pieces too. So let's just make 3 of them just to save time. And you could throw in other type of citrus if you want. You could even throw in like some rosemary sprigs or something. And they're pretty easy. Whatever you do, they're just kind of naturally going to look like a little rose. I'm just going to use scraps just to save time. And then just fill the rest with water and then freeze it overnight. And that's it. Okay, so our dosa is browning. You can see sprouting on the edges there. It might take a minute to loosen it, and then we're gonna flip it just for a minute or so. And it should be crisp. I think your samples were made a little earlier. They probably weren't crisp anymore. But they should be crisp when you first make it. Okay. So one thing we're gonna do. Probably actually not gonna have time, but the last thing that we haven't done is dipping the pine cones in chocolate. So I might not get to show you all that, but you can melt the chocolate in the microwave, or you can use a double boiler. You just want to if you use a microwave, just microwave it in 30-second increments so you don't burn it. The original recipe I found used chocolate chips, but they don't melt as well. And that's actually intentional. So when you make chocolate chip cookies, the chocolate doesn't go everywhere, right? And that's because they have less cocoa butter. So if you use baking chocolate, it will actually be a little bit easier because normally when you dip things, like if you dip strawberries or something, it doesn't really matter that much. But since we're making these little pine cones with all these little almonds, you know, you don't want the chocolate to get stuck in there. So you want it to be kind of pourable and runny, which is harder to achieve with chocolate chips. You can add coconut oil until it happens. But again, they actually have less fat in there. So you have to add quite a bit of coconut oil with this kind of chocolate, baking chocolate. You might not need any coconut oil or just a little bit. And if you add too much coconut oil, then they won't really harden as well. And they'll melt easily in people's hands, or if it's slightly warm in the room, like it is in here, I think it's kind of hot in here. So, you know, if you can get your hands on this kind of like baking chocolate or a bar of chocolate, then it'll work a little bit better. Okay, so I don't think I'm gonna have time to show you how to dip the chocolate. I'll stay after and do one, but I want to make sure we have time to do our raffle. So we have a raffle ticket. We have 3 of these silicone ice cube trays so that you can make these rose ice this holiday season. 5, 6, 9, 7, 8, 4. Oh my God.
You have to check the number because I think it's not really nice.
Yeah, that's you. Yeah. 5, 6, 9, 7, 9, 0. All right. Okay, one more. 5, 6, 9, 7. Thank you. 7, 8, 7. You. So if you want to stick around for a minute, I'll show you how to dip the pine cones. But this is our last cooking class of the semester. Again, we have tons of recipes on our website, so please check it out. We have lots of other holiday ideas. We still have a few workshops. It's the beginning of the month. We have a challenge starting next week, the Good Nurture Challenge. So check out our newsletter. It's all in there, and hopefully we'll see you again before the end of the year. But yeah, thank you for coming.